power of an average person who just wants to use their ability to exact some measured change in their little corner of the world. If we had 4 or 5 million people doing that on a weekly basis, we can absolutely change this country.
Let's talk about change. The truth is, nothing changes unless you change. And if you want to step into your full potential, you need to surround yourself with the right people. That is exactly why I have created the Empowered Life community. Within this community, I'm going to be teaching you the exact same mindset and energy practices that I have taught my clients that are paying me well over 6 figures, including CEO owners of billion-dollar organizations and professionals at the very top of their fields. You're going to get access to 2 live virtual calls every single month with me, where we're going to dive into mindset, energy practices, spiritual principles that are going to help you thrive in every area of your life. Can't make a call? No worries. We're going to provide you with a recording so that you can catch up anytime. Plus, you're going to have the opportunity for direct coaching from me and to learn from incredible guest speakers who are going to share their best practices and growth. Remember, you become the people that you spend the most time with. So why not spend time within a community that is going to elevate you and your life? For an introductory $499, you're going to get a full year of support and coaching alongside high performers who are committed to expanding their careers, their growth, their finances, and to elevate their overall quality of life. Just click the link in the show notes or log into rudiricksteins.com to lock in your spot and start your transformation today. Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast, a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, then hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Aniston Ricksteins, and this is the Empowered Life. Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast. My name is Rudi Ricksteins. I'm your host, and today we are joined by Coach Bill Courtney. Man, am I excited to have him on the show. You are going to get so much value from who he is, how he shows up. But when we talk about living an empowered life podcast, if we were looking for an example of what does that look like, it would be Coach Bill and how he gets to show up creating impact in people's lives. We always talk about how life is not about you, but that when you have had your life experience, how do you turn around, teach it, share it? Coach Bill is the founder and CEO of Classic American Hardwoods, which is an $80 million company. He's also a best-selling author of Against the Grain. He has a phenomenal podcast, which I highly recommend you go and listen to, binge watch, An Army of Normal Folks. I love the title. We're going to get to that later because there's nothing normal about this man, because he is also the inspiration behind the Oscar-winning movie Undefeated, which is where I would love to start a little bit of our episode today. But before we do that, I just want to say welcome to the show. Coach, thank you so much for joining us today.
If my publicist changes careers, I might just use you. That was about as good an introduction as I've ever heard. So thanks.
Well, Bill, you deserve it. Let me tell you, I wish I worked harder on that because, man, when I just look at you and what you've done and how you do it, you are charismatic, you're funny, you're intelligent, you're motivational, and then you're just the right amount of kick in the pants for somebody who needs to take a step forward. And I love and appreciate every single one of those qualities. I want to bring our audience up to speed here for a moment. For somebody who hasn't watched Undefeated, doesn't know who you are, doesn't know your story, they've just heard the introduction, but they're still kind of left in the dark, I would love for you to give us an abbreviated version of your story. I want to set the foundation for our audience first and foremost. We're talking about somebody who lives in Memphis, Tennessee, and has a business near a underprivileged school where men are 3 times more likely to be dead and or in jail, let alone just have a job or go to college. And he decides he's going to go in and coach a high school football team where at the end of a 2-year period, 31 out of 32 of the seniors end up going to college. This is an area that has a 0.33% high school graduation rate. And here we have 31 out of 32 kids graduating. And I have no doubt that you played a profound role in that journey.
Could you tell us how did you get there? What motivated you to get there? And then we'll dive in from there.
We got to go back a little bit to fully understand even why I was there. Um, my dad left home when I was 4. He actually died about 8 months ago, and I got a call, I think 3 weeks after his death, to be informed that he'd passed. That was pretty much my relationship with him. And my mom was married and divorced 5 times. My fourth father, after consuming a handle of Usher Scotch, loaded up a 38 caliber pistol, and as 2 bullets whizzed by me, I had to jump out a window to save myself that night and go to a neighbor's house and call the police, who got to the house as he was reloading, and my mother was cowered in a corner in the attic. So I grew up with a lot of dysfunction, a lot of trauma, candidly. But certainly, I had 2 good grandfathers. But in terms of a daily male presence in my life, I guess I had a male presence, but none of it was very positive at home. And it was my coaches who I lettered in 6 sports in high school. My athletic director says I was a triathlete because I'd try anything. Um, and so I was this scrapping, kind of big athletic kid, um, who really wanted a male presence in my life that was positive, and couldn't find it at home, but I found it in my coaches. So fast forward, when I go to college, I get a degree in psychology and English, but I really want to coach and teach because I was passionate about the ability of a teacher and a coach to reach young men who needed to be reached, because I know how profoundly important that was in my life. So I started working on my doctorate and teaching school and coaching football for a living. Um, and I met Lisa. And for those of your guests who are watching this on a screen, you can see that this is just, I mean, on a good day, I'm a 6. Lisa's a 10. And so in the South, when you're fat and ugly and you marry a gorgeous woman, how do you keep them around the house? So we just started having kids. So we had 4 kids in 4 years, and $17,000 a year with no insurance as a teacher and football coach just wasn't making it. And so I had to leave that profession and bounced around some odd jobs and started my business that you talked about at the top of the show. But coaching remained my passion. And so, in the state of Tennessee, you can be what's called a certified non faculty football coach, which means you can be a school coach, not like some dad helping out, but a coach, a legitimate, straight up certified guy who's running the program coach without being a teacher if you take all these classes in Nashville. So I took them. So even after I left coaching and teaching as my primary profession, because it was my passion, and I continued to do that while building my family and while building my business, and did that for 33 years. So why did I end up at Manassas? Well, when I started my business, it was on a wing and a prayer, and I had $17,000 in the bank and was borrowing money, and I needed industrial space to start a manufacturing plant. And so I bought the cheapest land anywhere in West Tennessee, because when you're broke, you buy cheap industrial land. And it happened to be a mile from Manassas. I'd never even heard of Manassas. And some people over there knew of my past in coaching, called me up and asked me if I'd be interested in coaching. And when I got there, I found 17 kids on a varsity football team whose previous 10 years record was 4 wins and 95 losses. They were terrible. Um, But what I also found there, although they didn't necessarily look like me, um, what I found were a whole bunch of images of what I was at those guys' age. And I fell in love. Certainly, there's a lot of work to do to get a team that was that bad to be competitive. But there was also a lot of work to do for the individual young men on that team to get them competitive far beyond football, competitive in life. And that challenge was really what I loved about coaching anyway. So I was at Manassas because it was close, because it was in proximity to my business, because I could handle the time, because there wasn't a lot of traveling time. I stayed because I found a whole lot of versions of what I was only 25 years previous. And my passion about what you can do as a teacher and a football coach to exact some positive measure on some young men who, despite their very tough exterior, I felt the sadness and brokenness inside their interior because I once lived with it. And so I went to coach. And then 7 years later, some goofy guys wearing straight legged jeans and scarves, which nobody in Memphis wears straight legged jeans and scarves, show up with a couple of cameras. They follow us around for 9 months and they say they're going to make a movie that we're convinced we'll see on channel 483 some Wednesday at 3 in the morning. And 2 years later, I'm walking down the red carpet at the Academy Awards.
I had said at the beginning that you have a sense of humor, and then you have an ability, obviously, to be able to communicate that move people forward. And we're seeing sparks of this come through, and we've only literally just hit record. I want to go back a moment and just say I'm profoundly sorry for the loss of your father. I know you didn't have a relationship with your father, as you had said, but I can only imagine that that must still be a difficult transition for you.
Well, what's difficult is the loss of opportunity. I have four delicious, beautiful children. I have a gorgeous wife and a beautiful family. I've been married 33 years. And from whatever measure of success I've achieved, both professionally, um, in my family, and philanthropically, uh, that man could have enjoyed that ride. And when I was 4 years old, he chose to exit my life and he never chose to re enter it. And so the sadness, candidly, is the trauma and the dysfunction that followed my life after his exit. And then, secondly, his inability or unwillingness to make amends and try to come back into my life because he could have enjoyed a greater part of his latter years and chose not to and died alone. And, while honestly, I don't um, necessarily uh, feel pity for him because we make our beds and we lie in them. Um, I do mourn the loss of opportunity that we'll never have a chance for.
I would like to spend a little time today talking about opportunity because, you at the end of the day coach and support people to move things forward. I do so in a professional capacity within organizations, and you've done it undoubtedly inside of your business within the people around you. But I want to focus in on the school that you were supporting. And, you didn't mention it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for you. You you did say that they had 4 losses. I mean, they had 4 wins against 95 losses over a 10-year period, but within 2 years, you had moved the school to 18 wins and only 2 losses. And there's a profound amount of opportunity that was presented to these kids that I don't believe they had prior to. When I hear your story, when I learn a little bit more about you and what you've done, it begs to me to ask the question, like, what did you do? How did you go in first and foremost and win these kids over? You said, you didn't look like them, but there was a piece of you in them. I also want to call back to you saying, I fell in love with these kids. I fell in love with this place, and that to me just speaks into the success that you had because of your intention of how you went in and what you pulled out of it. But I would love it if you could share a little bit about what was the defining moments, if you could call back to them, where you really saw these kids that looked at you as something external, as somebody outside of where they're at, maybe a leader, a teacher above them, to all of a sudden you were in it with them and you turned everything around and brought them along.
Um, I think who we are is a collection of aha moments, lessons, and experiences. Um, I dare any human being to sit down over the course of an hour and recount every single step of their life. You just don't do that. But what you do is, on occasion, you have lessons, aha moments, or experiences that are so stark and profound that, as a collection, they start to define who you are and how you think and how you approach life. One of the top three moments in my life occurred about halfway through my first season at Manassas, and it answers your question. Um, when I first got to Manassas, I started coaching football. And look, there were athletic kids there. They just had never been properly instructed on how to play the game. They didn't have the proper equipment. They didn't have the proper practice. They didn't have the proper um, uh, technique, and they didn't have the proper commitment. But it's hard to get kids to commit to you when you don't commit to them all of the things that they need to be successful. So the first thing you do is you level the playing field, and you give the same opportunity to kids from poor backgrounds as kids have in wealthy backgrounds. And one of the side benefits of that is you start eliminating excuses. And I think that's really important in business and in any aspect of your life. If you're in a leadership position, equip your people, but understand, by equipping your people, there's a catch to that for your people, which is you are now eliminating their excuses for failure. So we started doing that. So we started coaching football, but we also started coaching fundamentals and tenets that are basics that are pretty much absent in that particular population. Things like character, commitment, the dignity of hard work, the value of the hands on a clock. Really, all of the things that are in my book, Against the Grain. Each chapter is a different tenet, and those are the things we started coaching, as well as football. So halfway through the season, we're 3-3. Now, I think 3-3 is pretty average, but when you've won 4 games in 10 years, they thought I was a fat, redheaded version of Pete Carroll or somebody. They were buying in. And so everybody was yes or no sir on the football field. But after practices and the games, while the whole team was buying into the football, only half the team was buying into that important stuff, the stuff that was going to last them long after the days of playing football were over. And they were back in the streets engaging in the same behaviors that got them not only to 4-95 on the football field, but 4-95 in life, metaphorically. So I was frustrated, and every coach kind of has a guy, the guy you develop your first relationship with. And I went to my guy and I said, "Hey man, what do I got to do to get this half the team to buy into the important stuff like your half the team?" And I kind of knew he would just tell me what was up, but instead I got that dismissive tone. If you have kids, you know the tone, and it was, "All coach, just keep doing what you're doing." I'm like, "No, man, real talk. Why can't I get that half the team to buy in the important stuff like you're half the team?" And he said, "Coach, man, I don't want to hurt your feelings." I said, "You're not going to hurt my feelings. I want to know why I can't get that half the team to buy important stuff like your half the team. You're all yes or no, sir, buying in the football, but that's not what I'm just here for. What's up?" And he said, "All right, real talk." And I said, "Yeah, real talk." He said, "Coach, they're trying to figure out if you're a turkey person or not." And I'm like, "Man, I have learned a lot of vernacular vocabulary that I'd never employed in my life prior to showing up at Manassas, but I have not heard that one. What's a turkey person?" And he said, "Coach, every Thanksgiving and Christmas, people roll into our neighborhoods and they give us gifts and ham and turkey, and we take them because we ain't got none. But then they leave and we never see them again. Makes you wonder if they're doing that because they care about us or they're doing that to make themselves feel good." And he looked me dead in the eyes and he said, "Coach, for real, man, what the hell are you doing here? Look, if you or your audience serve soup in soup kitchens or do stuff for the needy, that's a beautiful thing. The moral and the lesson behind this story is not to dissuade you from doing those things. It's beautiful. The question is, what's your motive?" Are you truly motivated by the edification of someone who is not as blessed as you? Or are you checking a box? Are you doing it so people in your business know you're doing something nice so that helps you maybe for the next promotion? Does it elevate you among your peers because they think you're so nice for doing something for poor folks? Are you enjoying the backslaps? What is your motive? True servant leadership is about the very root word, serving. Serving for the edification of someone that's not as fortunate as you. And I got to tell you, when he said that to me, it pissed me off. I was spending a lot of time there. I was spending my money there, ACT prep classes, new equipment. My own children were coming up, and I was spending 3, 4 hours a day at Manassas after work, making sure these kids had what they needed, coaching them up, winning ball games. And I'm like, I'm here every day. If I'm a turkey person, I went to the proverbial, you can't help these folks. If what I'm doing now is not enough, that can't be helped. About, uh, I don't know, about a week and a half after that conversation, the daily newspaper in Memphis, the Commercial Appeal, had a 7x9 picture of me on the front page, not the sports page, the front page. And the title was Manassas Miracle. Because nobody ever thought anybody could win at Manassas. And people walking up to me and saying, "Hey, Bill, tell me about Manassas." I mean, "Yeah, man, I got them to 3-3. What else?" "Well, I got them taking ACT prep classes." "Well, what else?" "Well, I got them new equipment." "Well, what else?" "Well, I got." Anytime anybody asked me anything about Manassas, I was all too happy to tell everybody everything I was doing. Meanwhile, I had kids getting called Uncle Toms. I had kids getting called sellouts. Homework. That white man's making you do homework. He ain't got nothing for you. I had kids getting beat out of gangs to be able to be on the team. I had kids for the first time in their life adhering to principles and rules that were foreign to not only them, but many in their families. I had kids truly sacrificing to be part of one positive experience in their life. And anytime anybody asked me about Manassas, I always told them everything I was doing. And the reason I know a turkey person's a fraud, and the reason I know that this lesson is so valuable is because when I stepped back and started listening to myself and think about the lesson that 17-year-old kid from the hood taught me, I realized that I was enjoying what I was doing at Manassas, not because of what the kids were getting out of it, because what I was. And I had to step back. And I started talking about the kids. I started giving the kids credit. I started saying I was just along for the ride because I was. I will tell you, those kids welcomed me into their neighborhoods a lot more readily than my peers would have welcomed them into mine. What gives me the right to assume that I'm doing them a favor by showing up in them neighborhood? So I started working hard on everything I was doing, but instead of of taking credit, I simply basked in the success of the kids and gave them credit for it. And when that happened, we went from 17 kids to 70 kids. We went from 5 wins to 18 wins. When that happened is when life became enriched for me in ways I thought would never happen because of the kids' success. Um, so in short, the answer to your question is in your family life, in your children's life, in your spouse's life, at your work, in your philanthropic life, in your social life, understand that if you are motivated by your own exaltation, people will say when you're in a leadership position, yes or no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, no, ma'am, because they're required to. But the minute you turn and walk, if you're motivated by your own exaltation, they'll stare darts at you because they know you're a fraud. The flip side is if you work to be a servant leader, to serve as a leader, to help those around you reach their goals, quell their inhibitions, they will in turn um, understand what your motives are and always support your mission. Um, and in the words of a young man who taught me one of my life's most valuable lessons, don't be a turkey person.
I love that you gave the summary at the end. My follow up question to that was going to be, how do we take this practice of principle and apply this into life? Because not everybody is going to be in an environment where they are going to be able to coach a school team, or maybe they're not qualified to coach a school team, or maybe they don't have the passion to get into the sport. But how can we take the practice or the principle and apply it into our everyday life? And so, if you're in an organization, if you manage a team, maybe you own a company, maybe you have a large organization, how do you take the same practice and principle? And you, again, beautifully articulated that it's about pouring into the people and helping them achieve, and not making it so much about yourself. Um, I would love to
You,
ask you, because you
you
speak very
can be,
openly.
I'm sorry, you can be an amazing servant leader without ever leaving your house. Consider this. We have a 48% divorce rate in the United States. Now, I'm not divorced, but I'm the son of a 5 times divorced person, so I can speak to it. We have a 48% divorce rate in the United States. It's down from 51%, and the government will tout that as progress, but the truth is it's not, because the only reason it's down from 51% is fewer people are even bothering to get married in the first place, and they just have children and break up. What if, when we married one another, we simply said this: I'm going to spend the rest of my life serving you. I'm going to serve you. I'm going to help quell your fears. I'm going to do what I can to support your goals and dreams. And I am going to serve. I'm going to love you by serving you for the rest of your life. And if your spouse said the same thing to you, and you literally spent your days serving one another, selflessly serving one another, leading one another through that service, divorce ends. Think about think about what's going on with children today, and social media and bullying, and the disconnect between the generations of parents and children. Are we raising our children showing them what servant's love is, or are we raising them on either of the other two polar opposites, which is one, trying to be their buddy, which is horrifically dangerous, or being nothing but a disciplinarian, having never gotten on their level to serve them? Your job as a parent and a spouse is paramount and primary to any other job you have in business, philanthropy, social, anything. And you can employ servant leadership at home uh, to enrich your own life and those lives of those around you, um, far more profoundly than you can anywhere else. And oftentimes, it's the last place we do it.
My wife gave me that advice years ago when I was in corporate America and I wanted to leave corporate America to start a coaching business. And I had, in a moment of frustration, said to her, "Gosh, I just wish I could leave my job. I'm tied to this job and this bonus and the lifestyle. I just want to start coaching people. I want to start impacting people." And she just smiled at me with this loving smile. I also married a 10 out of 10 wife. And she looked at me and she just said, "Rudy, like, don't you see it, man? Like, you can coach people right where you are at." She's like, "There are people all around you. You just be who you want to be where you are." And that one phrase changed everything for me, because, like you said, I can coach my kids at home. I can be supportive. I can be, and I love the terminology you're using, like servitude, being in a state of constant servitude, of just everybody that is around you. And that is how you can step into achieving what I call your highest and your greatest potential. And just such beautiful shares. Um, there's so many things I want to add on. I'm going to say something for the benefit of the audience, and I'm going to get to a question. If the divorce rate is sitting at 48%, the latest data tells us today that if a husband and wife pray together, literally together, hands and knees together, 99% success rate in the marriage. And that's because you both believe in something common, you're in it together, and then there is a power and a force that is greater than you. I'm going to leave that there and move on to my next question. But if
Hold
you
it.
are
You
in,
can't do that. You can't do that. You can't just leave that there. I want to add, I promise, 60 seconds.
no, you can take as much time as you want. This is yours.
What you just said is true. It's absolutely true. I think the demographic, I think the actual data point is like 96% of marriages where the husband and wife pray together routinely last. Um, so tagging that on servant leadership, Who was the greatest servant to ever walk the planet? And if you think about that, you think about the most powerful leader to ever dawn the planet ended up also being the greatest servant. So is it any wonder that when following the greatest servant leader, you end up becoming a servant leader, and that marriages and relationships last and prosper? It all fits together, bro.
Hey, it's Aniston Ricksteins here, and I want to ask you, have you ever wondered if there's more to your life and work than what you're doing right now? What if I told you that the universe is hiring and you were born to fill a role that will bring you true purpose and success? In my new #1 best-selling book, The Universe is Hiring, Discover the Role You Were Born to Fill, I'm going to show you exactly how to step into that role. This isn't just a book full of inspiration. It's a roadmap to help you start shifting into a more fulfilling life right now. You'll get clear on your unique purpose, learn how to align with your strengths, and take actionable steps towards the career and life that truly light you up. If you're ready to make a change and start living the life you were meant for, grab your copy today. Available anywhere you buy your books online or click the link in the show notes.
I'm glad you beautifully added. We have such a diverse community, and I want to just stress to anybody that's listening from any form of religion, of where you are. All I ask is that you take the practice and the principle of being a servant leader and leading with kindness, with love, with compassion, and like Coach, you had said so beautifully, it starts at home. You start with your spouse, then with your kids, and then you expand and extend that out and into the world. I believe that every single experience that we have in life is always serving who we get to become. Your story beautifully shows that because, you had so many fathers, forefathers, over the course of your life before one pulls a gun on you, shoots at you twice. I can imagine how traumatic the experience must be. It paints a picture for the environment, for the lack of safety and security and structure and foundation that you had. You then had these coaches that poured into you, impacted you, created a shift in you. That then lit a fire within you to be a person of servitude. You eventually get into business, you create tremendous success for yourself and for your family. Whereas most people would say, I'm good, I'm going to buy a lake house, I'm going to get a boat, I'm going to go fishing. You turn around and you impact the kids around you. I know that there is a story around Jim Tippin, who was the catalyst for you going into coach at these schools. And I would love to speak about this just for a moment, but from this lens. You see, I believe that everything is always happening in your life to prepare you for who you get to become. I know that at the time when somebody pulled a gun on you and shot at you and they're supposed to have a fatherly relationship with you, then that doesn't feel like it's serving you, but it was driving a specific behavior that got you to be who you are today, to create the impact that you've created. I also know that when I look at all of the experiences of what you had, the coaches that impacted you, it gave you the necessary fuel and the understanding and the importance of what that role looks like so that one day you could turn around and do the same. We don't know what the impact is going to be because the kids are still growing. They're still creating their impact, and that ripple effect will continue to grow and expand the same way the coaches impacted yours. Jim walked into your life and encouraged, you to step out of your comfort zone as he stepped out of his comfort zone. And I look at those as these divinely orchestrated moments because I do believe in a power that is so great, so big, so bold, that knows everything. And you followed that nudge and that intuition. So many people don't follow those nudges. My question to you now is, if Jim was the catalyst that really brought you back into the coaching in the school system, do you feel like you would have got there without that nudge from him? Or do you think that that was more of, a force greater than you extending a hand and nudging you forward?
No, Jim Tipton deserves all the credit in the world for me ever having walked through the doors of Manassas. He's the guy that said, some friends of mine are volunteering at some inner city schools. They're really having a lot of success and they're enjoying it. And I want to do the same thing. And he started volunteering at Manassas with the baseball team. While there, he found out the football team really needed help. And that's how I ended up over there. I don't even know if I'd know where the school was had it not been for Jim. Um, um, so I agree with you that there are plans, and you rarely know what the plans are, and you will oftentimes look back on something that happened 5, 10, 20 years previous in your life and think, wow, that's why I had that experience to prepare me for this occurrence. And Jim and I were actually fraternity brothers in college. Lisa and I bought our first house, and I was out cutting the grass, and Jim Tipton drives by. I hadn't seen him in 8 years, and he was unhappy at his job and wanted to try something different. And I just started my business, and we started talking. And he ended up 6 months later coming to work for my new company as a sales guy who was a fraternity brother. And then 4 years after we start the business and get it going, he decides to do the thing at Manassas. And then he drives me to Manassas, none of which would have happened had we not met as 18-year-olds in college. Um, so, no, I wouldn't have been there. And to your point, um, these things that end up being profound in our life are often strung together by what seem like coincidences, but are actually part of a greater plan.
I love to use that example. And when I first learned your story, that was 100% my intention for bringing you on the show, because I want people to realize that sometimes in their pain or in their struggle, it's the qualification for who they get to become. It's the preparation for what they get to do next. And we don't have that vantage point of being able to look around us and say, oh yeah, there's that silver lining, the tethering that's connecting me to the miracle that's around the corner. We just have to stay in a place where we trust that that miracle is around the corner. I would love to ask you, what do you think is missing in leadership today? If we just look at where we are as a country, where we are as people, we're spending more time really being divided than we are united. And a lot of the work that you've done in your business, starting at home with your marriage and then going into Manassas, into the college, I mean, into the school team, was really about bringing people together. How could we take a page from your book and apply that into life, to our life, really, to support America?
Alex Cortez is the producer of my podcast, and Alex is like Encyclopedia Brown. And one of the reasons the podcast does so well is because he feeds me lots of content, and I put it into my own words and try to make common sense out of complex issues. But he's really good at giving me the data to understand the complex issue. So you're going to have to bear with me. Um, 86% of Pew Research respondents from last year said that they know that when they watch the news, it's tainted to one political viewpoint or the other, depending on which station they watch, i.e., Fox, Newsmax, CNN, NBC. 85% of the respondents to this Pew Research thing said they know when they're watching news on one or the other of those types of stations that it is slanted toward one or other political viewpoint. The same people also said 90 something percent, 92, I think, said that any news or anything they get off of social media channels is at the very best slightly inaccurate, all the way to patently false. So we know that. At the same time, there has not been in modern times a president with greater than a 50% approval rating after 2 years in office, regardless of party. So after 2 years in office, there's not a single president, regardless of party in modern times, that our country has had greater than 50% approval rating of. Congress traditionally lives in a habitual 25 to 35% approval rating. For the first time in our nation's history, last year, the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be a lifelong, nonpartisan body, has less than a 50% approval rating. So all this Pew Research tells us, we don't approve of our politics, we don't approve of our judiciary, and we know that we're fed crap by everywhere we get our information from. Yet, the exact same Pew Research says that the average American spends 2.3 hours a day looking at or listening to the very stuff that we agree and say is wrong. So on the one hand, we don't like what's happening and we know what we're being fed is wrong. But on the other hand, like a bunch of sheep, we flock to those narratives because we fear not belonging to one of those, one or the other. We have got to get in our minds, we've got to get our hands around the absolute fact, because I've lived in this world now for 12 years, the absolute fact that there is an enormous amount of wealth and power migrated to very few and collected and held by crafting narratives that scare the hell out of us and divide us. And those narratives are fed to us, and we know they're fed to us, and we know they're wrong, yet we still continue to like sheep, suck it all down inside ourselves. It is what, why are we so divided? Well, we know why we're so divided. We just hadn't had the temerity to stand up to that division and say, I'm not listening and abiding to that shit anymore. I refuse. And until we have the courage to stand up in the face of all of this stuff that's dividing us, this content that, like sheep, Pew Research says, I mean, we admit it, we go to it and we start looking at people for what they are. Until we do that, we will continue to suffer a denigration of the civility of our republic. It is high time we start denouncing the power grab and the financial grab of those that seek to craft narratives that divide us and tear us apart at our threads. It is high time we start denouncing that and saying, you know what? An army of normal people, just us, you and me. I don't care if you're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, gay, straight, Christian, agnostic, Jewish, Muslim, Democrat, Republican, progressive, conservative. I don't care about any of that. All I care about is, are you a human being in our society trying to contribute to it, trying to to offer some leadership and some service to it? Because if you are, I don't really care how you vote, how you worship, or who you love. If you're doing that, I can celebrate you. And if I'm doing that, you can celebrate me. And if from that foundation of mutual respect for the way we're acting in our humanity, we can now start having civil, non-threatening conversations about the stuff that matters and find commonality. If we could do that, we don't need all this other crap that we continue to surround ourselves with. But until we have the courage to do that, we will continue to be torn apart.
So, what do you say to the individual that's listening to you now saying, the information I'm hearing from you resonates with me, and I agree. I spend too much time on social media or watching the news, and I'm aware that it's skewed. And the idea of, I create the impact myself sounds great, but no one else is going to do it. And if we don't all do it at the same time, it's never going to move forward. What would be your advice?
So I said what I just said to you in an interview about 4 years ago. And I was particularly angry that day because it was one of those typical days that, okay, like recently, an airplane hits a helicopter and people die. Can we just please talk about the humanity of that? Can we talk about the catastrophic loss of life? Can we talk about the people in the helicopter that were giving their life to serve our country and the military? Can we talk about the people on that airplane, the children and the young ones who were part of the Olympic team and or part of the skating team and the other people on that who lost their lives? Can we talk about the first responders who had to pull bodies out of a river? Can we talk about the trauma of the families who expected everybody to come home that night or land in DC and celebrate whatever they were going to celebrate, who ended up 2 days later convalescing on the side of an icy river, the Potomac, with candles in their hands, bawling over their lost loved ones that they thought they'd see that they'll never see again? Can we just do that? Or do we need to have a conversation about DEI, a conversation about air traffic control issues? Well, that was really Reagan that did that. And then, of course, Obama did the DEI thing. So maybe all of this is Reagan and Obama's fault. Are you serious? That's what we're going to talk about? Where's our humanity? And so to me, that when we politicize that, we deserve every bit of misery that comes along with it because we create it for ourselves. And by tuning in and having these arguments around the water cooler, we are giving the power to the people feeding us those narratives. I'm just done with it. So, what do I say? Speak up. Would you please tell somebody talking about that, say, man, that is wrong. People lost their lives. Can we not just handle the humanity of it? And so my thing is, I said that in an interview. The guy called me back who interviewed me. He said, I can't quit thinking about this idea of an army of normal folks and what you said. And he said, let's start the show. And I know that's the podcast part we're going to get to. It's a good segue to it. But the whole reason we started the podcast was we denounce that and we interview every week normal folks you've never heard of who are doing extraordinary things in their community. And we do not care from what demographic they hail. We celebrate the work they're doing. And if we can grow this movement of normal people celebrating one another for the good work they're doing, for the service they're doing, for the leadership they're providing, and their little neck of the woods, then all of a sudden maybe we can break down these artificial barriers that are tearing us apart and claim back the narrative of our country from the people who have concentrated it in New York and who continue to grapple to it because of the power and the wealth we give them through it. So I just think, an army of normal folks convalescing around service and leadership and sharing one another's stories to create a foundation of civility and decency is the antidote to what is destroying us.
I asked you the follow up question because I was hoping you would get to what you had just shared. And that is that we as individuals so often give our power away. We believe, well, we can't control who's in government. I mean, we can vote, but how much control do we have? And we can't get other people to vote the way that we want to vote. Or maybe we don't have any party that we agree. And there's just all of this divide, divide, divide. But our power lies in what we choose to think, what we choose to say, and what actions we choose to take. And
And
uh,
and
and there's
what we choose to allow those in our sphere to say. They have freedom of speech, but guess what? So do you. And if vile vitriol that is complete horseshit that destroys society comes out of someone in your sphere's mouth and you remain silent, you are just as bad. You have freedom of speech to speak up and call that out too. And until we have the temerity and the courage to take back the narrative, then we deserve exactly what we get falling prey to it.
I want to ground for a moment that we started today peppering that everything is always happening as a pre qualification for who we get to become. I fully believe that where we are as a society is the preparation for who we get to become. And it gets bad before it gets really good. And I fully believe we're on the other side of things getting really, really good because first and foremost, we are human beings who are grounded in nothing but love, kindness, and compassion at the core. It's inside of every one of us. We may have a barrier around us that a self-defense mechanism because we had a tough upbringing or because we weren't loved or because we were, criticized or whatever the experience was that created who we are. But there isn't a person on the planet that doesn't have a feeling when they see a cute puppy or a video of animals on Instagram, right? We just have this love that can ooze out of who we are, and I want people to be grounded in that. I know we're coming up on time today, Bill. I want to just talk about your podcast for a second. You've alluded to it a couple of times. I would love for you to share a little bit more about, an army of normal folks. You have already articulated beautifully that it is about them just being normal people doing beautiful and profound things. But I would love to know a little more about, the show, what your gain is in producing the show and putting it out. Obviously, it's a tremendous amount of time, effort, and energy. And what would we gain by dialing in every single week and listening to your show?
So, listen, I'm the host. Alex Cortez is the producer. It was his idea. Um, it's very well produced. It releases, it's been on there now, I guess, 19 months. It releases every Tuesday. Then every Friday, we have a short shop talk vignette where listeners send us emails about stuff they'd like to hear us comment on, everywhere from some fundamental to current events. So it's really 2 shows a week. The main show on Tuesday, Alex, well, now so many listeners send us ideas of people, but we're just trying, we're finding, and we fly them all to Memphis. So they're all in personal interviews. They're, meant to be entertaining and sometimes humorous and thought provoking and certainly tear jerking in some cases. People that you've never heard of that are doing the most extraordinary things. The idea is this: when your passion and your discipline, and when I mean discipline, I mean abilities, when your passion and discipline collide with opportunity, that's when amazing things happen. And each one of these guests bear that out. There are guests that's passionate about something and has an ability, and they see an opportunity to employ that passion ability in an area of need, and they just have the courage to go do it, and lives change. And we tell stories from everything from people who work in foster care to people who work in law enforcement to jails to synagogues to just homeless people all across the spectrum. And every single time I do an interview, I am reminded that the power of an average person who just wants to use their ability to exact some measured change in their little corner of the world, if we had 4 or 5 million people doing that on a weekly basis, we can absolutely change this country. One of the things I hear all the time is, Bill, I'm so inspired. I'd love to do something, but I just don't know where to start. And I get people's fears and inhibitions of crossing the street. So remember at the top, I said one of the biggest things I'm about in leadership is excuse removal. An army of normal folks is excuse removal, because here's the deal: you may not be able to coach football like me. Fine. You may not be able to teach violin to people in the inner city because you don't have that discipline. Fine. Every week is a new story of a person with a new passion and new discipline. And if you listen long enough, you are going to hear a story about something that you are passionate about, that you do have an ability in. And the story itself is a blueprint for how you can do that in your neck of the woods. And every single guest, including me, every episode, leave our personal contact information. So not only do you get to hear a blueprint, you get to speak personally to the architect of the blueprint if you're moved. And then you can do exactly what they did in Albuquerque. You can do that in Louisville. So an army of normal folks is threefold. One, to entertain you, to grab you. Listen to it. You'll have fun. You'll laugh. You'll cry. It's entertaining stuff. The second thing is to highlight stories of ordinary people, to inspire other ordinary people uh, to do more in their communities, and to give them blueprints and architects to it, to eliminate the excuse that you want to get involved, but you just don't know how. If you listen long enough, you will. And then the third thing is to literally grow. Literally, I know it sounds hokey and I know it sounds idealistic. Okay, I get it, but to literally grow this army of normal folks, listening to, communicating with, and interacting with each other around this podcast, through the social media, through the emails, through all of it, supporting one another, regardless of race, creed, love, none of it, regardless of any of it. And all of a sudden, seeing one another's humanity and celebrating one another's servant leadership to create this foundation of millions of people convalescing around this idea of servant leadership, an army of normal folks. And if we do that, I genuinely believe we can change some of the attitude of the country.
I know you already have, but you're only getting started. I think that it's just another reminder that every single thing that we're doing in our life, and I look at your life as the case study today on the episode, but everything that we're doing in life is always preparing us for who we get to become. And I fully believe, and my audience has heard me say this countless times, your life is not about you. Your life is about that when you've experienced it, you turn around, you teach it, you share it, you uplift, you inspire. And that when we approach anyone, anything, any situation with kindness and compassion at the center, we are going to change the world. And I love everything that you're doing and how you're showing up. It has been a beautiful hour with you today. I just want to say thank you so much for your time. We're going to put your book link into the show notes. We're going to put the movie link for the Undefeated Oscar-winning movie into the show notes. We're going to put the links for your podcast and Army of Normal Folks into the show notes. We'll put your social links and website for anybody who wants to hire you to speak. I've actually heard a couple of your speeches, and you are hilarious. And so I encourage people to connect with you. I want to just ground something for a moment, because I really, really bonded with you through watching you in how you speak about your wife. And when I do keynotes, I'm almost always inevitably talking about my wife. She is the center of my world. And and when I got to see you doing it, it was like, oh, that's what it feels like to watch somebody do that, because I just adore everything about her, and you do it so beautifully. For anyone who's watching on YouTube, Bull just lit up, and like his physiological state shifted just in referencing his wife. So Bull, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. What parting words do you have for our empowered audience in living their most empowered life? Meaning the power to have and to be and to do and to achieve lies within the individual. What would you share?
Don't be a turkey person, and understand, as long as there's breath in your lungs, there is no finish line.
I love that so much. I say to people all the time, there's something really big and profound for you to do in life still, because you're still around. And if you're still around, there's more for you to do. And there's a greater plan, and our job is to get to the end result. Bill Courtney, thank you so much for coming on the Empowered Life podcast. I greatly appreciate you. I greatly appreciate your message. To our incredible audience, man, I love you so freaking much. I want to challenge you to take something from this episode today and to put it into practice. Maybe it's standing up for something that you believe in when somebody's saying something around you. Maybe it's for you changing how you think or how you feel or how you behave. And if you are in partnership and you're not praying with your spouse, maybe today's the day where you take a knee and pray together so you can stay together. We love you guys. We'll catch you in the next episode of the Empowered Life podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And we would love your support in leaving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check the show notes for more information on how you can find us online and on Instagram. Now go create an amazing day for yourself, and we'll see you again soon.